The wind screamed across the red rocks like something alive and angry. Ben Carver pressed his face against the reinforced window of his weather station and watched the sky turn purple. 3 years on Redstone Vale had taught him to read the planet's moods, and right now the planet was furious. His equipment beeped warnings that he already knew by heart. The electromagnetic storm would hit in less than 2 hours. This one looked bad. Worse than bad. The readings showed energy levels that could fry every circuit in the colony if they weren't careful. Ben logged the data and sent it to the main settlement 30 kilometers away. His job was simple. Sit in this small outpost, watch the weather, and warn people when trouble came. Most days were boring. Today was not boring. He pulled up his long-range sensors and swept across the landscape. The dragons would need to find shelter soon. Ben had spent 3 years watching them from a distance. Massive creatures with wings that could block out the sun. Intelligence that showed in every calculated movement. The colonists called them Skyfire dragons because their scales glowed when they flew at night. The dragons tolerated humans. Nothing more. They had their territory in the mountains. Humans had their settlement in the valley. Nobody crossed those invisible lines. Through his sensor display, Ben spotted the dragon pack. 4 adults circling their nesting ground about 8 kilometers north. He zoomed in and felt his stomach tighten. 3 small shapes huddled in the nest. Hatchlings. The dragons were trying to shelter their young before the storm hit. The wind picked up speed. Ben's station groaned under the pressure. He checked his shelter protocols and made sure everything was locked down. Outside, the world was turning dark even though it was only afternoon. Lightning crackled between the clouds, but it wasn't normal lightning. It moved sideways, jumped in strange patterns, glowed with colors that didn't belong in nature. His sensors flickered. The storm was playing havoc with the electronics already. Ben switched to backup systems and kept watching the dragon nest. The adults were working together, using their massive bodies to create a windbreak. It wasn't going to be enough. The storm hit like a physical blow. The station shook. Alarms screamed. Ben grabbed his desk as equipment started failing around him. He killed the alarms and focused on keeping his core systems alive. Through the chaos, one screen stayed active. The motion tracker. 3 small dots were moving away from the nest, fast, too fast. Ben's blood went cold. The hatchlings were being blown away by the wind. He watched the dots tumble across his display, carried like leaves in a hurricane. The adult dragons were moving too, but they were struggling against winds that could flip a transport vehicle. Ben made a decision that went against every rule and bit of common sense he had. He pulled on his emergency gear. Heavy coat. Face shield. Magnetic boots that could lock to metal or stone. A rescue beacon. His hand shook as he sealed his suit. The storm tried to kill him the moment he opened the door. Wind slammed him against the frame. Rain came down in sheets so thick he couldn't see 5 meters ahead. The magnetic boots were the only thing keeping him attached to the ground. He activated his personal beacon and started moving toward where his sensors had last shown the hatchlings. Walking was impossible. Ben crawled on his hands and knees, letting the boots pull him forward across the rocky ground. Lightning struck close enough that he felt the heat through his suit. His face shield cracked. Water poured through. He kept moving. The first hatchling appeared out of the storm like a ghost, huddled against a boulder, wings wrapped tight around its body. It was about the size of a large dog, scales dull without their usual glow. The creature looked up at Ben with golden eyes full of fear. Ben had never been this close to a dragon before. Up close, he could see that the scales weren't just armor. They were beautiful. Complex patterns that would probably shimmer in normal light. Right now, the hatchling was shaking. Its cold-blooded body was losing heat in the storm. He found the second hatchling 20 meters away and the third another 30 meters beyond that. All of them were shutting down from the cold. Ben knew he couldn't leave them. The storm would kill them in another hour. He also knew that touching a dragon's offspring was probably the fastest way to get himself killed when the adults found out. The first hatchling didn't fight when Ben picked it up. It was heavy, maybe 30 kilos of muscle and scale. He tucked it inside his coat and felt the creature press against his chest, seeking any warmth it could find. Ben went back for the second one, then the third. By the time he had all 3, he could barely move. The magnetic boots struggled with the extra weight. The trip back to the station took forever. Ben fell twice, lost his grip on one hatchling and had to chase it down as the wind pushed them both across the rocks. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned, but he kept moving. When he finally got the door open, all four of them fell inside together. Ben lay on the floor, gasping for air. The hatchlings piled on top of him, scales cold against his skin. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside his small station, Ben held 3 dragon babies and wondered what he had just done. The gentle chirping sounds they made didn't sound like the roars of apex predators. They sounded scared. They sounded like children. Ben closed his eyes and held them tighter. Water dripped from Ben's hair onto the floor. His coat lay in a soggy heap by the door. 3 dragon hatchlings were spread across his main room, and all of them were in trouble. Their scales had lost almost all color. Their breathing came shallow and quick. Ben had pulled creatures from a frozen death, but they weren't safe yet. He grabbed every thermal blanket from his emergency supplies and spread them on the floor. His quarters weren't big. One main room that served as kitchen, work area, and living space. 1 small bedroom. 1 bathroom. The heating system was designed for 1 human, not 3 dying dragons. Ben cranked the temperature as high as it would go. He pulled his mattress off the bed and dragged it into the main room. The hatchlings needed to be together, needed to share body heat the way they would in a proper nest. He arranged the blankets on the mattress and carefully moved the first hatchling onto it. Up close, he could see the differences between them. This one had bronze-colored scales with dark streaks running down its spine. It opened golden eyes and made a sound like a question, a chirp that seemed to ask who Ben was and why everything hurt. The second hatchling was larger, with scales that looked silver, even without proper light. It tried to lift its head as Ben picked it up, tried to stay alert even though its body was shutting down. This one was a fighter. Ben placed it next to the first and watched them instinctively curl together. The third hatchling was the smallest. Its scales were almost white with hints of pale blue. When Ben reached for it, the little dragon pressed against his hand instead of pulling away. It made soft sounds, almost like a cat's purr. Ben lifted it carefully and added it to the pile. The 3 hatchlings immediately tangled together, tails wrapped around bodies, wings folded over each other. They fit like puzzle pieces that had always belonged together. Ben piled the thermal blankets on top of them, leaving just their heads visible. It wasn't enough. They were still too cold. Their bodies weren't generating heat on their own yet. Ben made a decision and climbed under the blankets with them. His own body heat, combined with the blankets and the room heating, might be enough to save them. The hatchlings responded immediately. They pressed against him from all sides. The fighter pushed its back against Ben's chest. The small one tucked itself under his arm. The bronze one draped its neck across his legs. Their scales felt like cold stone at first, but slowly, painfully slowly, they began to warm. Ben stayed as still as he could. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the planet. Inside, 4 beings from different species huddled together and shared warmth. Hours passed. Ben's muscles cramped from holding the same position, but he didn't move. Around midnight, the bronze hatchling lifted its head. Its scales had regained a faint glow. It looked at Ben for a long moment, then made a small chirping sound. Not distress this time. Something else. Maybe gratitude. Maybe just recognition that this strange creature had saved its life. The fighter woke next. It immediately tried to explore, pulling itself away from the warmth to investigate Ben's equipment. Ben watched it sniff at his computer console, poke its nose into his supply cabinet, and try to taste one of his boots. When it started shivering again, it came back to the nest without being called. Smart enough to know its limits, the small one stayed pressed against Ben. It hadn't moved except to breathe. Its eyes were open, watching him with an intelligence that felt unsettling. Dragons weren't animals. Ben had known that in theory. Having one study him from 30 centimeters away made it very real. There was a person behind those golden eyes. A young person, scared and confused, but definitely a person. Ben realized he was hungry. The hatchlings must be too. He carefully extracted himself from the pile and went to his food supplies. Protein bars, dried fruit, some kind of synthesized meat that the colonists pretended tasted like chicken. He had no idea what dragon hatchlings ate. He tried the synthetic meat first. The fighter was immediately interested. It sniffed the offering, took a cautious bite, and then ate the rest in 2 gulps. The bronze one came next, more careful but willing to try. The small one wouldn't eat from Ben's hand. It watched the others eat, then crept forward and took its own piece. Ben gave them more. They ate until their bellies were visibly round. Then they collapsed back into their pile and fell asleep almost instantly. Young things needed food and warmth and rest. It didn't matter what planet they came from. Ben ate his own meal standing up. He checked his equipment, found most of it fried by the storm. His main transmitter was dead. The colony probably thought he was dead too. He couldn't call for help and couldn't tell anyone what he had done. For now, he was alone with 3 dragons. He thought about their parents, 4 massive creatures who were probably tearing the landscape apart looking for their babies. They would be frantic, angry, desperate. Eventually, they would come here. Eventually, they would find their children sleeping in a human shelter. Ben had no weapons that would stop an angry dragon. He had no way to explain his actions. He could only hope that parents of any species would understand that he was trying to help. Outside, the storm began to break. Gaps appeared in the clouds. The first light of dawn colored the sky. Ben heard something in the distance. A sound like thunder, but rhythmic, deliberate. The roar of dragons calling for their lost children. The hatchlings heard it too. They woke up together, heads lifting, and answered with their own high-pitched cries. Ben took a deep breath. Time to face the consequences of his choice. He carried the first hatchling to the door. Dawn spread across Redstone Vale like spilled paint. Orange and red light touched the wet rocks and made them glow. Ben stood outside his station with 3 dragon hatchlings at his feet. His heart hammered against his ribs hard enough to hurt. 4 shapes circled in the clearing sky above him. The adult dragons descended slowly. Each wingbeat sent air rushing across the ground. They were massive in a way that made Ben's brain struggle to process their size. The largest one had copper-colored scales that caught the sunrise. Her mate was midnight blue, so dark he seemed to pull light into himself. 2 others flanked them, probably siblings or cousins. All 4 moved with perfect coordination. They landed 50 meters away. The ground shook with their weight. Ben fought every instinct that screamed at him to run. He sat down on the cold ground instead. Made himself small. Made himself vulnerable. Showed that he was no threat to anyone. The hatchlings responded immediately. They ran toward their parents with happy chirps and calls. Ben felt a strange ache in his chest watching them go. He had known them for less than 12 hours, but he had kept them alive. That created a bond whether he wanted it or not. The fighter hatchling reached the adults first. It crashed into the blue male's legs and started making excited sounds. The male bent his massive head down and sniffed his child carefully, checking for injury, making sure every scale was in place. The bronze hatchling went to the copper female, and Ben knew he was looking at the matriarch. The way she moved, the way the others deferred to her, it was obvious. The small one stopped halfway between Ben and the dragons. It looked back at the human, then at its mother, then at Ben again, confused, torn. The matriarch made a low rumbling sound calling her child home. The small hatchling took a few steps toward her, then sat down and refused to move further. Ben stayed seated. He could see the matriarch processing what she was seeing. Her child smelled like human. All 3 of her children did. They had been inside a human den, had eaten human food, had slept pressed against human warmth. She lifted her enormous head and stared at Ben. He had studied dragon behavior for 3 years from a distance. He knew that direct eye contact was a challenge. He kept his gaze on the ground in front of her. Respectful, submissive. He was not trying to compete with the apex predator of this planet. He was just someone who had found her children in trouble and done what he could. Minutes passed. The tension felt solid enough to touch. The other adult dragons stayed back, letting the matriarch make the decision. The blue male watched Ben with eyes that seemed to look through him. The 2 other adults kept glancing at the hatchlings, counting them over and over to make sure all 3 were really safe. Ben slowly reached for his jacket. He moved like he was underwater, giving the dragons time to see that he wasn't grabbing a weapon. He pulled the jacket off and held it out. The fabric still held heat from when the hatchlings had been pressed against him. It smelled like them and like him mixed together. The matriarch tilted her head. Interested. The bronze hatchling chirped at her, ran to Ben and grabbed the jacket in its mouth. It dragged the jacket back to its mother like it was presenting evidence. The matriarch lowered her head and sniffed the fabric carefully. Ben could see her nostrils flare, could see her processing scent information that told her the whole story. Her children had been cold. The human had made them warm. Her children had been hungry. The human had fed them. Her children had been in danger. The human had brought them to safety. She lifted her head and looked at Ben again. Really looked at him. Then she did something that made Ben forget how to breathe. She took 3 steps forward, closing the distance to 30 meters. Then she lowered her massive head until her chin touched the ground. A bow, slight but unmistakable. A gesture of acknowledgement from one intelligent being to another. The other dragons relaxed immediately. The blue male made a sound like rocks grinding together. It might have been approval. The 2 other adults approached the hatchlings and started checking them over with the focused attention of worried relatives. Ben carefully stood up. His legs shook. He had survived. The matriarch lifted her head and watched him rise. She made a sound, deep and resonant, that Ben felt in his bones more than heard with his ears. The hatchlings responded to it, gathering together. But the small one turned and ran back to Ben. It pushed its head against his leg and made soft sounds. The matriarch watched this happen. Her golden eyes tracked every movement. She called her child again, firmer this time. The small hatchling looked up at Ben with something that looked painfully like trust, then walked slowly back to its mother. The dragon family gathered together. They should have left, should have taken their children and returned to the safety of their mountain territory. Instead, they settled down where they were. The matriarch positioned herself facing Ben. The male positioned himself facing the station. Protective stances that also made it clear they weren't attacking. They were waiting. Ben realized they were waiting to see what would happen next. Would the other humans come? Would they bring weapons? Would they try to hurt the dragons while they were vulnerable in the open? The matriarch was testing humanity. She was gambling everything on the hope that Ben's kindness was not unique among his species. Ben sat back down. He had nowhere to go anyway. His transmitter was broken. Help would come eventually when he missed his check-in, but not for hours. Until then, he would wait with them. Human and dragons together in the morning light, building something that had never existed before. The small hatchling curled up at its mother's feet but kept its eyes on Ben. The bronze one was already asleep. The fighter was trying to climb on its father's back. Normal young behavior after trauma. Life continuing despite everything. Ben smiled despite his fear. They were safe. All of them were safe. That was enough. The rescue team arrived 3 hours after dawn. Ben saw the transport coming from kilometers away. 2 vehicles, probably carrying his supervisor and a security team. He stood slowly and wondered how to explain what had happened. 50 meters away, the dragon pack watched the approaching vehicles with bodies gone tense and ready. Director Walsh stepped out of the first transport. She was a tall woman with gray hair and the kind of face that showed every emotion she felt. Right now she looked angry. 2 security officers flanked her, weapons lowered but ready. Behind them, Dr. Singh emerged from the second vehicle. The colony's lead researcher looked more curious than worried. Walsh stopped 10 meters from Ben. Her eyes moved from him to the dragons and back again. "Carver," she said, and her voice could have cut steel. "What did you do?" Ben explained. The storm, the sensors showing hatchlings in trouble, his decision to help. Bringing them inside, keeping them warm through the night. He kept his words simple and his tone steady. Walsh's face went from angry to disbelieving to something that looked like panic. "You violated quarantine protocols," she said. "You approached xenofauna classified as dangerous. You brought them into human habitat. You made contact without authorization." She was listing charges, each one serious enough to get him sent off planet. "You could have started a war." "I saved 3 children," Ben said quietly. He was too tired to be diplomatic. "That's all I did. I saved 3 children who were dying." Dr. Singh moved closer, ignoring Walsh's warning look. She was staring at the dragons with open fascination. "They're still here," she said. "Why are they still here?" "They have their young back. They should have returned to their territory." The matriarch shifted. The movement was small, but it drew every eye. She stood, her massive body unfolding until she towered over all of them. Ben felt the security officers tense. He raised one hand slowly, a gesture that he hoped meant calm down. The matriarch took 1 step forward, then another, walking directly toward Director Walsh. Walsh, to her credit, didn't run. She stood her ground as the dragon approached. The matriarch stopped 3 meters away. She was carrying something in one foreclaw, held carefully like it was precious. She lowered her head and placed the object on the ground between herself and Walsh. Then she stepped back. It was a piece of equipment, one of Ben's weather sensors destroyed in the storm. The matriarch had found it, had brought it here, had returned it. Dr. Singh made a sound like she was choking. "That's tool use," she whispered. "That's symbolic thinking. She's trying to communicate." The matriarch wasn't done. She turned and walked to the edge of the perimeter, to the invisible boundary between dragon territory and human territory. She looked back at the humans, waiting. The small hatchling suddenly broke away from its siblings. It ran across the open ground, heading straight for Ben. The matriarch made no sound to stop it. The blue male shifted but didn't intervene. They were letting the child make its own choice. The hatchling reached Ben and pressed against his legs. It looked up at him and made the same soft sound it had made the night before. Then it walked past him, crossing into what everyone understood was human space. It sat down, clearly visible to both species, and waited. Ben's breath caught. The security officers looked at each other in confusion. Walsh's expression was unreadable. Only Dr. Singh seemed to understand what was happening. "It's a bridge," she said softly. "She's offering her child as a bridge between species." The matriarch remained at the boundary, patient, watching how humans would respond to this massive gesture of trust. If they hurt the hatchling, if they rejected it, if they showed cruelty or fear, she would know that humans could not be trusted. If they accepted it, protected it, honored the faith she was showing them, then maybe something new was possible. Walsh looked at Ben. For the first time since arriving, she seemed uncertain. "If we mess this up," she said, "the consequences could be catastrophic." "If we reject this," Dr. Singh countered, "we're throwing away the most important first contact moment in colonial history." "She's not sending a diplomat. She's sending her child. Do you understand what that means?" Ben walked to the hatchling. It chirped happily when he knelt beside it. He looked at the matriarch, trying to communicate without words. "I will protect this one. I promise." The massive dragon tilted her head and made a low sound that vibrated through the ground. Then she turned and led her pack back toward the mountains. The two other hatchlings followed, looking back several times. But they went. The small hatchling watched its family leave. It made a sad sound, then pressed closer to Ben. He picked it up, surprised by how much heavier it felt than the night before. "Young things grew fast. We need to set up proper housing," he said. "It needs heat and food and space." "I can't keep it in my quarters." Walsh rubbed her face with both hands. "This is insane," she said. But she was already pulling out her communication device. "I'll talk to the council. We'll need to restructure our protocols, create new guidelines for contact." She looked at Ben. "You're going to be in charge of this. You started it. You finish it." Dr. Singh was already making notes on her datapad. "We need to document everything. Language, behavior, diet, sleep patterns. This is unprecedented." Over the next week, Ben's life changed completely. The colony built an extension onto his station, a large space with proper heating and room for a growing dragon. The hatchling, whom Ben started calling Dawn in his mind, adapted quickly. It learned to recognize human words, started responding to its name, showed intelligence that impressed even the skeptical council members. The dragon pack didn't disappear. They watched from the mountains. Sometimes one of the adults would fly close, checking on the young one. Dawn would call back to them and they would answer. A connection maintained across the distance. Not everyone was happy. Security Chief Raymond Briggs argued constantly for stronger defenses. He didn't trust the dragons, thought this was all a prelude to attack. He made sure Ben knew his opinion every time they crossed paths. But for now there was peace. Fragile and new, but real. A human and a dragon sharing space. Two species learning to understand each other one day at a time. 6 weeks after the storm, Dawn was twice the size she had been. Her pale blue scales had darkened and now caught the light like mirrors. She could speak 3 human words clearly. Ben, food, safe. Dr. Singh recorded every sound, every gesture, building a database of dragon communication. The bronze hatchling started visiting. It would appear at the colony perimeter and wait until Dawn came out to play. They would wrestle and chase each other while their respective species watched nervously. The fighter was more bold. It walked right into the colony one day and knocked over a supply crate trying to investigate what was inside. Ben spent his days documenting dragon behavior and his nights learning to understand them. Dawn taught him things without meaning to. The way she tilted her head meant curiosity. The chirp that went up at the end was a question. The deep rumble in her chest meant contentment. They were building a language between them, something that belonged to neither species but to both. The adult dragons grew braver. They began leaving kills at the colony boundary, small prey animals that showed humans what dragons ate and where to hunt. When a water recycler broke down, the blue male watched from a distance as humans struggled with repairs. The next morning, he led them to a natural spring that no one had known existed. Dr. Singh was writing papers that would change how humanity understood intelligence. Chief Briggs was stockpiling weapons and running security drills. Director Walsh was trying to keep both groups from killing each other. Ben was in the middle of it all with a rapidly growing dragon who thought humans were just odd-looking members of her extended family. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning. Ben was outside with Dawn, teaching her to recognize different human tools. She could identify a wrench now, could bring him specific items when he asked. They were working on screwdrivers when Dawn went rigid. Her head snapped toward the eastern hills. Every scale on her body stood up. Ben felt the ground vibrate before he heard anything. Dawn released a cry that he had never heard before. Pure distress. She launched into the air, her wings still clumsy but powerful enough to carry her. Ben ran for the alarm. The canyon stalker came over the ridge like something from a nightmare. 4 meters tall, 8 meters long, armored hide that could stop most small arms fire. Predators so dangerous that even dragons avoided them when possible. This one was old and scarred and probably desperate. It had decided the human colony smelled like food. Alarms screamed. Security teams mobilized. Briggs started shouting orders. The stalker charged toward the nearest buildings where families lived. It moved faster than something that size should be able to move. Weapons fire bounced off its armor. It roared and the sound rattled windows. Ben saw Dawn flying toward the matriarch's territory, still calling that distress sound. He saw the stalker getting closer to the residential area. He saw children being rushed into shelters. Everything was happening too fast. The colony's heaviest weapons were still being set up when the dragon pack arrived. 4 massive shapes dropped from the sky like stones. The matriarch hit the stalker from above with both back legs. The impact sounded like a building collapsing. The stalker staggered but didn't fall. It turned on her with shocking speed. The blue male struck from the side. The 2 other adults circled, looking for openings. The stalker was outnumbered, but it was designed by evolution to survive. Its tail whipped around and caught one of the smaller dragons across the shoulder. She went down hard. Dawn landed next to Ben. She was making frantic sounds, wanting to help but too small to matter in this fight. The bronze hatchling appeared from somewhere, then the fighter. All 3 young ones gathered together, watching their family fight something that could kill them. The matriarch and her mate worked together with the precision of a species that had been hunting as packs for millions of years. She went for the head while he attacked the legs. The stalker was powerful, but it was alone. It was used to being the biggest, scariest thing in any fight. It had never faced coordinated intelligence before. The killing blow came from an unexpected source. The injured dragon, the one who had been knocked down, got back up. While the stalker was focused on the matriarch and the male, she came from behind. Her jaws closed on the stalker's throat where the armor was weakest. She held on while it thrashed. The male joined her. Together they brought the monster down. Silence fell over the colony. The dead stalker lay 50 meters from the residential buildings. The dragon pack stood around it, breathing hard, checking each other for serious injuries. Blood marked the ground, but all of them were alive. Briggs walked toward them slowly. He had lowered his weapon. Behind him, colonists emerged from shelter. Everyone had seen what happened. The dragons had come when called by one of their young. They had fought to protect humans without being asked. They had saved lives. The matriarch turned to face the gathered humans. She was bleeding from a gash across her shoulder. Her mate had a torn wing. They had risked themselves for a species that wasn't their own. She made a sound, deep and carrying, that echoed off the colony buildings. Then she did something unprecedented. She walked to Director Walsh. She lifted one foreclaw and very carefully, very deliberately pulled off a single scale. Dragon scales were nearly indestructible, and this one glowed with inner light. She placed it at Walsh's feet. Then she walked to Ben and placed another scale before him. Gifts. Marks of something that didn't have a human word yet. Dr. Singh was crying. She pulled out her recording device with shaking hands. In dragon culture, she said, her voice cracking, Scales are only given to pack members. To family. Ben picked up the scale. It was warm and felt like holding light itself. Dawn pressed against his leg and made her contented rumble. The bronze and fighter hatchlings approached the humans cautiously. Other colonists were moving closer, drawn by something they could feel even if they didn't understand it. Briggs stood very still for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon completely and set it on the ground. He looked at the dead stalker, at the wounded dragons, at the hatchlings who had brought their family to save people they barely knew. "We need bigger shelters," he said finally. "Strong enough for dragons too. Because the next time something like this happens, we should be fighting together from the start." Walsh picked up her scale. She looked at the matriarch and nodded slowly. Agreement, understanding. The beginning of something that had never existed before. "Yes," she said. "We fight together." The matriarch spread her wings and roared. Her pack answered. Dawn and the other young ones joined in with their higher voices. And for the first time, humans raised their voices too. Not in fear, in unity. 3 months changed everything. The colony looked different now. New buildings stood side by side with dragon perches built into the cliffsides. Young dragons and human children played together under the watchful eyes of both species. Ben's small weather station had become something bigger. A meeting place where two species learned from each other daily. Dawn was the size of a horse now. Her vocabulary had grown to 40 human words, and she understood twice that many. She could count, solve simple problems, and had opinions about everything. Currently, her opinion was that Dr. Singh's new measuring equipment was fascinating and needed to be investigated immediately. Ben rescued the datapad before Dawn could break it. "Not a toy," he said. Dawn made a huffing sound that he had learned meant amusement. She knew it wasn't a toy. She was testing him. The bronze hatchling, whom everyone called Copper now, was teaching human engineers about optimal heat distribution in buildings. The fighter, named Storm by common agreement, had appointed himself as the colony's unofficial security patrol. He took the job seriously, checking the perimeter every morning. The galactic representatives arrived on a Thursday. 5 ships descended from orbit carrying diplomats from a dozen species. The council had heard rumors about Redstone Vale. They came expecting to find either human corpses or dragons in cages. They found neither. Ambassador Jessic was a Talaran, a species that looked like someone had given a lizard hands and a really bad attitude. He stepped off his ship and stared at a dragon sleeping next to the landing pad. "This is not standard protocol," he said. Director Walsh met him with Dr. Singh and Ben. Chief Briggs was there too, though he looked like he would rather be anywhere else. "Welcome to Redstone Vale," Walsh said. "We do things differently here." The tour took all day. Jessic's team documented everything with scanners and cameras. They watched Dawn and Ben work together to repair a solar panel. They saw Copper teaching human children about wind patterns. They observed Storm bringing in a deer and sharing it with his human pack members. The Talaran ambassador's expression never changed, but his aide kept making shock sounds. "This is temporary," Jessic said finally. They were in the observation room overlooking the main plaza. Below, a dragon and 3 humans were playing some kind of game that involved a ball and a lot of running. Peaceful contact never lasts. One species always dominates, always. Maybe that's true for other species, Dr. Singh said. But dragons and humans share something important. We both love our children more than we fear each other. Jessic made a sound like rocks grinding. Sentiment. The first species to show weakness will be eliminated. A demonstration was scheduled for the next day. The council wanted proof that human-dragon cooperation was real and sustainable. Ben spent the night worrying. They had planned a joint expedition to the volcanic plains, an area too dangerous for either species alone. If something went wrong in front of the council, everything would fall apart. Dawn sensed his stress. She curled up next to him, her body warm against his back. "Safe," she said, one of her favorite words. "Ben safe. Dawn safe." He ran his hand along her scales. They had grown so much together. She had been a terrified hatchling once. Now she was confident, intelligent, and ready to show the galaxy what cooperation looked like. "Tomorrow is important," he told her. She made a thoughtful sound. "Important," she repeated. Then she added a phrase in dragon language that meant family bond. She had taught him that one specifically. It meant the connection between pack members who would die for each other. The expedition launched at dawn. 4 dragons, including the matriarch and her mate, 6 humans including Ben, Dr. Singh, and Briggs. The volcanic plains were 100 kilometers south and the landscape was hostile. Acidic vents. Unstable ground. Heat that could kill an unprotected human in minutes. Jessic and his team followed in their shuttle, observing from above. Ben rode on the matriarch's back, something that still felt surreal every time. She flew smooth and steady, adjusting her angle so he could breathe easily. Below, the landscape was beautiful and deadly. They landed at the edge of a massive volcanic crater. This area was rich in rare minerals that the colony needed, but surveying it had been impossible. Human equipment overheated. Dragons struggled with the toxic air close to the vents. Together they might succeed. Ben and Dr. Singh wore specialized gear and carried scanning equipment. The dragons used their superior mobility to access areas no human could reach. Briggs coordinated the effort, calling out hazards and keeping everyone safe. They moved like pieces of the same organism. Human precision and dragon strength working perfectly together. A vent exploded without warning. Superheated gas erupted from the ground directly in their path. Ben was too close, felt the heat through his suit. Dawn hit him from the side, knocking him clear. The gas cloud washed over where he had been standing. Her scales protected her from heat that would have killed him. The blue male called out a warning in dragon language. Storm translated it into human words he had learned. Ground weak. Move north. They adjusted course immediately. They completed the survey in 4 hours. Work that would have taken weeks or been impossible entirely. When they returned to the landing site, Jessic was waiting. His expression was unreadable. You could have been killed, he said to Ben. The dragon saved him, Dr. Singh pointed out. That's the point. We protect each other. Dawn walked up to Jessic. She was nearly full-grown now, taller than the Talaran at the shoulder. She looked at him with golden eyes that held unmistakable intelligence. Then she spoke, carefully shaping human words with a mouth not designed for them. Pack protects pack. This is human way. This is dragon way. This is new way. Jessic was silent for a long time. Around them, dragons and humans waited. The moment stretched. Finally, the Talaran ambassador touched his chest in a gesture of respect. The council will recognize Redstone Vale as a dual sovereignty world. First planet governed by 2 sapient species as equals. Walsh closed her eyes in relief. Dr. Singh started crying again, but happy this time. Briggs actually smiled. The dragons roared their approval and humans shouted theirs. Dawn pressed against Ben and made her happy rumble. They offered Ben a promotion. Director of Interspecies Relations. An office in the main colony. Official authority over all contact protocols. He turned it down. His place was at the weather station working with Dawn, building the future one day at a time. 6 months after the storm, Ben stood outside his station at sunrise. Dawn lounged beside him, her scales glowing in the morning light. Her siblings visited every day now. Other young dragons were starting to come to the colony too, curious about humans. In the distance, new colonists were arriving. They came to see the miracle of Redstone Vale, a place where ancient enemies became family, where 2 species looked at each other and chose cooperation over conflict. Dawn lifted her head and spoke in careful human words. More coming. More family, Ben smiled. Yeah, more family. The sun rose higher. Human and dragon watched it together. A new day on a world where anything was possible. Where one choice in a storm had changed the course of 2 species forever. Where a human had saved 3 hatchlings and those hatchlings had saved humanity right back. It was the beginning of something beautiful.